In this video, we'll discuss the problem of Nigeria. We'll analyze the common perception of the major problem in the country. Many believe corruption is the root cause of the nation's struggles, but is it really? We'll discuss why corruption should be better seen as an effect than a root cause. We will also discuss the dynamics around it. For example, if there is something else driving the corruption, then what can it be? When did it start, and how does it operate? We will then dive into the issue of identity. How do people identify themselves, and what is the implication of this to the Nigerian problem? Finally, we will explore what is disrupting the economy and how that has produced a chaotic structure that is fueling instability and backwardness. Above all, is there a solution for Nigeria? What model can Nigeria use to solve its problem and emerge as a superpower? Stay tuned for the breakdown. Welcome. So in this session, we're going to discuss the problem of Nigeria. If you are new here, please subscribe and follow us on all NEAT social media platforms at neatcommunity.ng. NEAT is an acronym for Nigerians Engineering Astounding Tomorrow, an initiative designed to bring together young and intelligent Nigerians who have what it takes to look beyond the challenges and divisions in the country and formulate a plan that would transform the nation and follow through with the plan. Right. Back to the topic of today, the problem of Nigeria. There is already a very common perception that the problem of Nigeria is corruption. The argument is always that the leaders are corrupt and often prefer to siphon resources from the public coffers for their own benefit instead of the benefit of the masses. Technically, there is nothing wrong with this argument, and to a very large extent it is correct. However, it does not really tell the true story of the problem. It does not give us the true picture of what corruption entails, what has been corrupted, or even how it can be addressed. Look at it this way, that someone is caught stealing does not necessarily mean that there is nothing making the person to steal. There could be other dynamics behind the scenes that are influencing the stealing. It could be that the person likes to steal, or they find themselves in a position where they opted for that as the only way to survive. If the intention is to stop both the person and other people from stealing, then the root cause of the stealing has to be addressed. Ignoring what is causing them to steal and just focusing on how many people are stealing or complaining that there are too many thieves in society is not the best course of action. In the same way, in the case of Nigeria, while it is okay to complain or highlight the looting of public funds as a big problem, the situation cannot change if the root cause is not addressed. This is why it is better to represent the problem of Nigeria from the root cause perspective than the effect. The corruption most people refer to is a mere effect of a root cause. So, what is this root cause and how do we address it? Without beating around the bush, the root cause is colonization. Many people often view colonization from the lens of a past event, something that happened several years ago. One commentator once said, "Why should Nigerians continue to blame their predicaments on colonization that happened over 100 years ago?" The issue with this school of thought is that it often forgets about the reality that no problem can disappear on its own. Problems will remain a problem until it has been removed or addressed. It is similar to Newton's first law of inertia, which states that an object at rest stays at rest and an object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon by an external force. So how long the problem has been there is not a premise to assume it is no longer a problem if it has not been specifically removed. The other way the effect of colonization is downplayed in Nigeria is through comparison of Nigeria with other nations. For example, it is not uncommon to find those who refer to India and other countries in the colonization conversation when arguing that people should not even be talking about colonization as a problem of Nigeria. To address this, let's do something, shall we? Just look up here for a minute. If I ask you to tell me about yourself, what would you say? Go ahead, take just 1 minute to respond to it. You can either say it out loud or write it down. Who are you? Pause the video and continue when you have answered the question. There are are chances that you either wrote down your name, your date of birth, your profession, what you like, and many other things. Now, how did you arrive that those things you wrote down or you said are the standard and best way of describing yourself? You may not realize this, but what you said or wrote down may just be a demonstration of the problem of colonization in Nigeria and Africa. Without realizing it, you may have described yourself from a colonial standpoint. That means that while supposedly free, the hallmark of your identity is things imposed on you from a colonial system. Because you have lived most of your life within the colonial framework, you have become embedded within the system that you now perceive it as the natural order of life. It has dictated your comprehension of your identity, even without scrutiny on whether this is factual or mere illusion. Whether this is exactly the same thing with the other nations such as India may be another matter for another debate, but since the focus of this conversation is Nigeria, we will narrow the conversation back to the Nigerian system and how colonization is a problem that needs to be addressed. So let's go back to that description of yourself. If you did not do it before, take this opportunity, pause this video, and write down something about yourself, and then continue. From what you wrote down, is it fair to say that your description of yourself is based on the assumption that you are totally an independent, unique entity? While talking about yourself, did you mention anything about your parents, your grandparents, or your community? Some would call it your place of birth. It is very possible that they did not feature because you were more concerned about things that the environment forced on you. You probably did not acknowledge that your voice, your blood, your skin color, eyes are mere products of your parents. To put it another way, did you acknowledge that you are not necessarily a new person, but an expression of your parents? Yes, that is right. Most Nigerians, particularly the indigenous people, are products of a marriage between two parents. That means that your existence is not entirely a new person, but a continuation of two pre-existing people. We should also remember that the formation of these two people to produce this new person did not happen through some artificial insemination or random sexual intercourse, but under the umbrella of a marriage. We should also remember what truly happens during a traditional marriage in Nigeria. In a typical traditional marriage, two different communities, often represented by families, come together to constitute a new family comprising a man and a woman. Over time, the family increases to include a man, a woman, and the children. What that means is that both the man, the woman, and the children become products or parts of the family institution. That puts the family as the institution or the whole, while the man, the woman, or the children are mere expressions of the family institution. It also puts the family as a mere component of a bigger whole, known as the tribe or ethnic community. Another important thing to note here is something that is even well known, and that is that everyone came to life through a family. Although circumstances could have brought people to life outside the family settings, it does not negate that they trace their origin through a family line. It then implies that it is illogical for any of us to try to disconnect ourselves from what brought us to life, especially when describing ourselves and our identity. In any conversation of the problem of Nigeria, it is important to put this at the back of our minds. The correct way of viewing an indigenous person in Nigeria is not through the lens of individual experiences or exposures, but from the perspective of a whole. That means there is a better and more factual way of answering that our initial question of who you are. The right answer should take this format. I am John Dyke, the son of Dyke Ogu from Okwa community. Or I am Bisola Ajiboye, daughter of Ajiboye Olaide from Ijebu community. Why is this important and necessary? Because unlike the colonial perspective that fails to give both yourself and an observer an idea of the key things about your individual and collective identity, this tells more to you and to another person of what you are made of. It also gives an indication of the kind of ideologies and viewpoints that you may hold very dear to you. Above all, it brings to the fore the institution or community that you represent. Although we may not realize it, but every one of the indigenous Nigerians represents a specific community institution. The things we do, the way we think, the things that matter most to us are heavily linked to the ideologies and way of life of these communities. In fact, it is this notion that the different communities had their way of life that makes colonization the problem of Nigeria. The best way of understanding this is focusing on the notion of way of life. Most times, people do not often realize that way of life and economy are exactly the same thing. It is like a person and a human. Two different ways of referring to the same thing. An economy of a people is another way of describing their way of life, which often includes their ideologies, food, culture, laws, and traditions. But we must bear in mind that it is not the different things that each individual do that define their way of life, but the historic position of the community institution. Imagine a community that once had a way of life and was governed by a leader several years ago. If the leader is removed without being replaced, the people are likely going to start doing something else that was either forced or influenced on them. It is fair to say that whatever they pick up after the removal of the leader is not a measure of their way of life, but a new habit or tradition. This means that the primary measure of people's way of life is their governance system. This is another important note we must bear in mind. Before we continue, we need to reiterate some of the positions established so far. 1. Nigerians are not entirely new people, but mere parts of a community by the virtue of being a continuation of the life of their parents and grandparents. 2. The governance system of a community defines their way of life, which is the same as their economy. 3. Each individual, though a unique expression, is a mere extension of their communal way of life or their economy. Now that we know all these, let's now go back to why colonization is the problem of Nigeria and Africa. Before colonization, almost every community in Nigeria already had a well-established way of life. That means they already had a well-structured economy. Most members of the communities did not see themselves as isolated entities, but they were integral components of the collective whole. The predominant way of self-identification was based on family and lineage. You will likely see people describe themselves as sons and daughters of a particular family in a particular kingdom or community, rather than what you have now. During colonization, this system was distorted, but not destroyed or deleted. Had the British attempted to erase those ways of life and replace them with a new one, maybe the problem would not have been as tough as it is today. But that is not entirely what happened. Instead of completely deleting and erasing the systems, the British only attempted to superimpose another ideology on them, thereby causing mass confusion. Basically, without a structured change to the existing way of life of the different communities, the British introduced new habits and traditions that resulted in a complete chaos, instead of structuring a new economy. However, they did not see it this way. Instead, they focused more on getting what was most important to them, which was making sure they made the most of the interference. As part of this arrangement, they added another complication to the equation, which is forcing the different communities together under one body without thinking of a structured way for them to coexist. Imagine first disorienting the internal understanding within the respective communities, and then trying to force the different disoriented communities into one body without considering the subsisting differences. This failure to define a good way for coexistence of these different ways of life meant that the center was now seen as a source for self-enrichment than any communal benefit. It presented the center as a looting site, a place for those who are willing to benefit from it by any means necessary. However, it did not change the natural identity of the people. That people saw the center as a place to be fought for by any means necessary did not mean that they forget who they are or what they represent. Instead, they found themselves in identity crises. It created the complications we see today, where they claim to be entirely different people and attempt to define themselves by their names, date of birth, experiences, profession, but are still subconsciously aware of the family, lineage, and communal standards they originate from. In addition to this subconscious acknowledgement of their ethnic background, they are also very much aware of differences between them and others in the tussle. In fact, It is this act of being torn in between self-expression, ethnic identity, and recognition of ethnic differences between them and others that is the main problem. It is the reason why colonization is a problem, and the breathing ground for the corruption that people are complaining about. This is also the reason why the argument about colonization cannot be from the lens of what happened in 1914 or several years ago, but the reality we live in. It is also the reason why it is counterproductive to attempt to compare Nigeria with another nation like India on the basis that if they survived, Nigeria's survival must also follow the same school of thought or process. The dynamics of colonization in Nigeria are not about past events, but present realities. The problems caused are still what is being experienced today, and it is what is driving corruption that many people are complaining about. For example, individuals, regardless of the community they come from, still see the governing apparatus, whether federal, state, or local government, as an opportunity for self-enrichment. People are still very much disconnected with their ethnic institutions and do not prioritize the integrity and continuity of their communities or families as part of their responsibilities. To make matters even worse, the same people still see themselves as members of ethnic communities and also judge others from the lens of ethnicity and tribalism. These dynamics are the realities that the colonization forced on everyone. This enforcement has created a new way of life, an economy featuring chaos rather than structure, pattern, and strategy. Under this economy, where a chaotic, unorganized way of life benefits the external than the local, how possible is it for corruption to disappear on its own? How can we expect that an elected official, a government employee, a business person, without a structured program and approach, will automatically stop attempting to benefit themselves ahead of others, when that is the order of the day? Every effort to produce a better Nigeria has often failed to ignore this reality. This is the reason why both the civilian governments and the military governments have failed. It is the reason why every administration ends up leaving a bigger mess of the economy they inherit. The Fourth Republic is close to 26 years old, yet things seem worse now than when it began. The question before us then is, how do you address this? Is there really a path forward outside true decolonization? Clearly, we must decolonize to move forward, but what would that decolonization look like? What will be the new way of life? Can it be done through the same way that has been tried repeatedly? The original decolonization approach attempted to create a nationalist nation. This approach assumed that because the diverse communities were forced into one nation, people would just disconnect from their origin, tribe, and tradition and converge at building a successful nation. But this hasn't worked. Instead of forgetting who they are even reminded more about their differences. And this has been the driver of all sorts of divisions. Instead of progress, it has fueled several political instability, economic retardation, and national identity calamity. So, do we continue to attempt this? Personally, I think it is a futile effort. Whether we choose to accept it or not, the reality is that Nigeria comprises different ethnic communities. Nigerians are more likely inclined to their ethnic and tribal roots than any nationalism ideology, and this will likely continue for a long time. The chances that there will be a generation of Nigerians who would forget or ignore their ethnic and tribal rights and privileges over a national ideology may just be a pipe dream that may never happen. It could be easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for this to happen. So what do? Can't we come up with another model? Is it not possible to have these different communities retain their individual differences while converging at the center for what they all share in common? Beyond the past, harnessing colonial legacy for development argues for a different model. It believes that there is a higher chance of a better economy, one that features less killing, less starvation, less corruption, if the different communities and individual differences are retained within a federal context. To get a copy of the book, click the link below. It is important you read it to expand your horizon so you can share your thoughts and comments on how best this can be done. Although you can leave a comment on the comment section, we recommend you visit the NEAT platform on www.civilrevo.org/NEAT to share your thoughts so it will be more useful in this initiative. Thank you, and see you in the next video.